here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of David Bash, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all the other groovy stuff. He is the man behind the International Pop Overthrow, which is a festival that takes place in various cities around the world each year. And if you go to the website, which you can see in the notes below, the link, you'll see where they were in 2025. But they have got dates for 26 that are available, including Liverpool at the end of May, but there's other ones around the world, mostly in America at the moment. So yes, it was a curious event that I was fascinated by, which you'll find out more about in this interesting interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. David, it's over to you.
Well, before I get to that, I want to comment that, I was brought up, I've lived in the States all my life, and I was raised in New York State. Our radio station, our top 40 station was WABC, which is a pretty big station. But you know what? We didn't get much glam on our radar, not nearly as much as you. I mean, all the bands you mentioned did have a hit or two in the States, but, well, actually, Slade didn't. The only song that even made our charts here was Come On, Feel the Noise, and it didn't even do that well. Obviously, in the UK, that's very different. I mean, T-Rex had Bang a Gong. That's it in the US. Obviously, in the UK, very different. Sweet had Little Willie, it was a big hit, and then the later stuff like Fox on the Run and Ballroom Blitz. But again, that's it.
And what about the Bay City Rollers? Did they penetrate?
They did. Not quite. Again, not as much as you, but yeah. I mean, they were. Saturday night was so big here that the Bay City Rollers were actually on some TV shows as regulars here. So they broke almost as big as they did in the UK. But I'm a little bit older than you. I'm 67. And so, but I was still kind of a late bloomer. I didn't have any older brothers or sisters, and my parents were not into rock and roll. So I kind of had to discover it on my own. But I started listening to top 40 radio at the end of 1969, and then early 70s top 40 radio, as I mentioned. That's the soundtrack of my life. I mean, obviously I've gone backwards. Ultimately, I discovered so many more things from the 60s that I never did here at the time. I'd known about the Beatles and I'd heard their songs as oldies in the early 70s, but I didn't have any of their albums until 1975. I was very late to the table when it came to that kind of stuff. But I made up for lost time, as you might be able to see in the background.
Well, yes.
This is just a fraction of my collection. Those are the big box sets.
The big box sets. Well, what was your first album that you bought then? If this was like 69 that you started to get excited.
No, I didn't buy any records. Well, all right, let me qualify this. I didn't buy any physical product until 1974.
Right.
The Beatles' Red and Blue album on cassette.
They were classics.
And then I didn't buy anything else until 1975. More cassettes. I remember, I think the Guess Who's Greatest Hits, and that's a band that didn't do too well in the UK. They're Canadian. And Elton John's Greatest Hits and Neil Diamond's Greatest Hits. But I think the first proper album I bought might have been Ram by Paul and Linda McCartney.
Right. Yes.
And that was in early 75.
And what was your first gig you went to?
Well, it was really cool. There's another band who was really big in the US who didn't quite make it that way in the UK called the Grassroots. You may know who they are.
No.
Uh, and yeah, well, yeah, you would know if you were raised here. But we had a carefree chewing gum contest at our junior high school where we had where well, schools from a 50-mile radius of New York City were eligible, and whoever sent in the most gum wrappers would win the Grassroots to come to their school. And lo
Mm.
and behold, our school won. Um,
My
so,
God, that's
so this
amazing.
was in May of 1972. I was 13, and I remember the principal of our school got on the intercom in the morning and said, "Okay, this afternoon you're going to go to the auditorium to see the Grassroots, also playing the Raspberries." Now,
Mm.
none of us at that time had heard of them. We're all looking at each other like, "Who?" Well, anyway, they came out. They came out first in these white suits, and they just slayed everyone. They opened up with "Go All the Way," which is now one of the biggest power pop songs of all time. And we couldn't believe it. We could not believe how good it was. We also couldn't believe how loud it was. I
No.
remember saying to my friend next to me, "That was great." And he says, "What?" And I said, "What?" And it probably wasn't even that loud, but to our virgin concert ears, it was.
Yes.
The Grassroots came out and did a great job, but everyone at the end of the show said, "Wow, the Raspberries blew them away." And yeah, and then subsequently they had that song "Go All the Way" became a big hit, as did several of their other songs in the U.S. So that's where it started for me.
That was the moment then. So during that
Yeah.
sort of 70s period, which was obviously a very formative period and part, did you sort of get into sort of English punk or prog rock or I don't know, garage, like the R&B sound of people like Dr. Feelgood, or what was your kind of musical direction during the 70s?
Well, in the early 70s, as I mentioned, it was top 40, but by the mid 70s, I started getting into albums, and I would listen to album rock stations like WNEW FM in New York or WPLJ in New York, and they played a lot of stuff that I'd never heard of, and I think I went in the direction of melodic rock and roll. But over the next few years, I heard so much stuff and accumulated so many records. And yeah, there was prog. Uh, there was prog pop like Barclay James Harvest, for example. I really
Yes.
fell in love with them. And of course, a lot of the US and UK bands that were doing all kinds of rock and roll. Um, but I never, at the time, I didn't really get much into pub rock, and the punk scene, the pure punk scene, didn't quite do it for me because it wasn't very melodic. But certainly, power pop was a big thing for me, and again, top 40, just anything melodic that had any relation to rock and roll, I,
Yes.
I was into.
Yes, and then because I was, obviously a little bit younger, so it was kind of for me. I mean, I had an older brother who was in the prog during the 70s, so I sort of used to enjoy sneaking into his room and playing these songs, albums. One being Barclay James Harvest, which was great, and there was also Wishbone Ash and all the classics from Yes, Genesis, and people like that.
Sure.
But it was the 80s, the indie pop world. So during that time, had you left college and gone to university, or had you gone into some sort of job career at that point in the late 70s, early 80s?
I went to New University from 1976 through 1980. I started at Syracuse University in upstate New York, and they had a really great. That was my first exposure to college radio, where there was no, there was no playlist. It was all free form. That's where I first heard Barclay James Harvest, for example. But that station really informed the Syracuse station really informed my taste. Then I transferred to New York University, which is in Manhattan, And the great thing about that was there were so many amazing record shops in New York. So I could, before class or after class or between classes, go to record shops and buy stuff. And in 1981, in the beginning of 1981, I left college, and for a while I just was kind of aimless. And then our family moved out to California, and I went back to school. I went to graduate school and got a degree in psychology, a master's.
Right.
And then after that, I started teaching for 7 years. I taught psychology at various community colleges, which are 2-year schools, not the usual 4 years. What a lot of people went to community college because their grades in high school weren't good enough to get them into a university. So what they would hope was if they did well at the community college, they could then transfer to a university. So a lot of
Right.
people use that as a stepping stone. Um, so, and other people just went to community college because they didn't want to get a job. Their parents told them either you get a job or you go to school. Um, so I had, the varying degree of educational level and interest
Yes.
embodied my students. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But
Yeah.
um, during the 80s, I certainly got into that C86 sound. Um, and I knew about the term. I knew about the C, whatever it was. Did C
Yes, well,
stand for?
there was a C81 cassette that obviously hipsters always think is much more interesting and better, because you would. And obviously then I was, it was the C86 cassette that I was excited by. But by then I suppose that was when I decided, that's when I discovered for myself people like the John Peel Show, and then there was the NME, and it was all very, I was young and hip. No, I wasn't hip. I was a sort of neurotic young kid who was all insecure and enjoyed sort of listening and being obsessed with music. So it was people, that time was things like the Smiths were a big part,
Sure.
lyrically,
Oh, they were
Morrissey.
they were they were big. I mean, they never broke into the mainstream in the U.S., but they were big on indie rock stations and college rock stations, and they did have a strong fan base. Some people lived or died by them.
Yes, well, they obviously had a massive influence, and there was a lot of kind of films, all very angsty at that time. There was
Mhm.
people, I don't know, Francis Ford Coppola had done those films, Rumblefish and The Outsider,
Right.
I think, and then a bit later there was films like Eraserhead and Betty Blue, and Jim Jarmusch movies like Down by Law and Stranger Than Paradise. So the 80s was full of sort of existential angst and worry,
Very
but
much so.
with a fantastic soundtrack. Politically things were a bit tricky at times, but it was also very tribal. So there was a lot of bands that I probably ignored or would have, I don't know, thought poo-poo to that. Now I regret and think actually they were quite good, but I'd lumped them with like the new romantic movement or
Sure.
synthesizers, and I thought, oh dear, that's cheap
Some
and
of the
tacky.
synth pop it was a little bit cheesy, but I've in upon reflection, I've grown to appreciate it
Yes.
a lot
Well,
more.
people like Depeche Mode, you realise, were a bit more than, just, they were just amazing. But at the time,
Depeche Mode. We had a radio station in Los Angeles called K Rock, and they played KROQ, and they played all kinds of UK stuff. Any band you could think of, practically they played. And Depeche Mode was a really big one with some of the DJs. When Depeche Mode came to Los Angeles to do an in-store at Tower Records, the crowd was so big that security had to keep pushing people back. They didn't want people to trample over each other. Now, in New York City, that would not have happened. New York was much more old school at the time, and rap was becoming really big there. And a band like Depeche Mode just wasn't played. So
right.
any of the '80s Brit stuff, big in Los Angeles, not so big in New York. But
Yes.
I was out here at the time, and I heard it all. And you know what I fell in love with right at the end of the decade was shoegazer music.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
Cocteau Twins, Lush, bands like that I loved and still
You
love.
go. Did you go? I mean, you were in LA. Were things like Rodney Bingham's disco
Yeah,
still going during that period?
Rodney Bingenheimer was on as a K Rock DJ. His show was on very early in the morning. I think it was, well, actually, I think when I started listening to him, he was nine to midnight on Sunday,
Right,
um, and he may he probably moved around a little bit but in the '80s he was very well known. But
right.
he didn't quite play the same stuff as the DJs from earlier in the day. They were the earlier in the day ones were playing bands like Depeche Mode and the Smiths and Love and Rockets and all kinds of. But Rodney would play a lot more obscure things. I mean, I can't tell you how many. I think what band was it? Was it Close? Well, maybe Close Lobsters. I may have heard for the first
Oh,
time there, and
that's a nice one.
Trash Can Sinatras. I didn't hear them until Rodney played them. Um,
Blimey.
he he broke a lot. He broke a lot of bands, both U.S. and UK.
And
But
did
yeah,
you?
he played the obscure stuff. Yeah.
And during that period, did you sort of also get into that American kind of mainstream rock that we started to have, like Billy Joel and the Bruce Springsteen album Born in the USA and bands? And then there was also the singer-songwriter. There was the Tracy Chapman moment and Suzanne Vega, and in some way, Michelle Shocked also was in there because of her indie pop kind of aesthetic. And then there was the classic album that everyone got was the Paul Simon Gracelands album. Were you also kind of intrigued with the sort of the main pops sound at the time?
Well, by the mid '80s, there wasn't much mainstream stuff that I liked anymore. I was, again, I was more at that point into college rock like REM. I took to very very quickly. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, I mean, most of the ones you mentioned, I never even bought.
No, no, I was
I
just kind of curious. I just,
I
that
loved
was.
XTC also, for
Well,
example.
yes, well, that's a long way from the world of Billy Joel. There was also the hair metal period during the
Well, you
late
said
70s.
Billy Joel. I like Billy Joel's '70s stuff and Bruce Springsteen's '70s stuff, but by the time Born in the USA, I never liked the production on that. The drums were too thwappy, for lack of a better word.
Well, yes, that was
And
wholly.
that wasn't I didn't yeah the early '80s production values on most mainstream stuff didn't do it for me. That's
No,
why that made me gravitate towards college rock, which
well,
again
absolutely.
was all the cool stuff.
So then, sort of the 80s, there was that period when, for me, then, with the world of indie pop and the Smiths between 83 to 87, which was a kind of golden period. And then things changed. The Smiths broke up. A lot of those bands thought we've had enough now. And then the world of ecstasy comes along, and then the soundtrack changes again with lots of those bands like the Primal Scream, Happy Mondays, Stone
Yeah.
Roses started to
Oh, the
incorporate more.
Manchester sound, and
That's
we were aware of the Manchester sound. They again stations like K Rock, the more album oriented, free form, no playlist kind of stations would play the Manchester stuff. So I heard Stone Roses and Happy Mondays and Spiral Carpets, all of those Manchester bands. Ultimately Oasis and Blur came out and were very big here very quickly. But the earlier ones, again, you wouldn't hear them on the most mainstream stations, but you would on the indie rock stations like K Rock, for example.
And what did you make of? There have been bands like, I suppose, Bad Brains and that kind of quite sort of heavy thrash sound. And then bands like there was Husker Du, wasn't there? And
I did
Sonic
like
Youth.
Husker Du a lot, but Bad Brains never did it for me.
Yes. And then obviously grunge and the Seattle sound started to
That
appear, didn't it?
Most of that didn't do it for me either.
Right.
I mean,
So,
Nirvana had some songs that were again, they did have melodies if you looked for them. Um, But most grunge, I didn't like the way that I didn't like the vocalists, and that's a big thing for me. If I don't like a vocalist, no matter what else, I'm not going to be I'm not going to be into the music. And grunge just had these, my friend. I don't know if you know who Stephen Stills is, but he was part of
Yes.
Crosby, Stills,
Oh,
Nash and Young.
yes.
My friend Mark used to call the grunge singer Stephen Stills on steroids. And I like Stephen Still's voice, but not not on steroids, the way the grunge guys sang it.
Yes.
So
So how did you navigate your 90s? Because, it starts pretty much with people like, Nevermind and that grunge scene, and then it sort of gets into quite a horrendous kind of heavy rock rap and finishes with Woodstock 99, which is obviously a weekend in hell, really, in a lot of ways, and the Marilyn Manson's Red Hot Chili Peppers. So how did somebody of your sensitivity kind of cope with this kind of barrage? Because you talk about productions of the 80s, the 90s also had their sound as well, didn't they?
in the mainstream, yes, but by then I was completely outside the mainstream. And in the mid 90s, there was a renaissance of what we call power pop. Like I mentioned, the Raspberries, Badfinger, there's a band called Shoes and Big Star, all those 70s bands. Then power pop died when new wave and new romantic music took over the early 80s, and then it lied dormant for about I don't know, about 15 years, and then suddenly all these young bands started doing a 90s version of power pop, and a lot of great melodies, hooks, harmonies, lyrics about girls, and about unrequited love, longing, things like that. But yeah, most of it didn't even come close to making the mainstream, but there was an underground scene of that kind of stuff. And there were, you had to look. This was, of course, just pre-internet, so you had to look. You had to. There were magazines that wrote about power pop, and you had to find them and read the reviews of the albums, which I did, and then
Yes.
ultimately started writing reviews for them. I wrote for magazines called Yellow Pills, Oddities, Amplifier, um, a Pop Sided, a few others that went heavily into power pop or to just melodic, very melodic pop music.
Yes.
There were some bands in the 90s in the UK that were doing that, like Thurman, Montrose Avenue. Um, Trying to think of who else in the 90s. Oh gosh, why am I forgetting? Silver Sun,
Right.
Teenage Fan Club, of course. Um, so there were a lot of bands that were doing that. They never broke into the mainstream, but they did sell records, and I kind of took it from there. And as the decade grew, the power pop renaissance grew also. I
Yes.
mean, and then when the internet started happening, even more so. And that's what motivated me to start International Pop Overthrow. I wanted to give a platform for bands from all over the world who did that kind of melodic rock and roll and power pop to be able
Right.
to play in front of people who would love what they do and on bills with like-minded bands.
Well,
So I
absolutely. Had
started
you
IPO in 98.
in 98? Had you come across the International Pop Underground Convention that was started by, was it K Records, Kelvin and his gang?
Oh, that. I that the bands on K didn't really do it much for me because I didn't the production was a little too indie and the vocals weren't and then there are exceptions, but the vocals really weren't on key. Um, International Pop Overthrow, that was the name was motivated for two reasons, but maybe the biggest one was there was a power pop band from the 90s called Material Issue.
Oh, yes.
And their first album was called International Pop Overthrow. It came out in 1991. Um, in 1997, sadly, the lead singer songwriter Jim Ellison took his own life. Uh,
Yes.
So I wanted to pay tribute to him and to the band by naming the festival International Pop Overthrow. Uh, the other reason was I wanted to bring an international pop scene under one roof, which was Los Angeles at the time. So we had bands from all over the world coming to play the festival. But our main goal was we wanted to overthrow mainstream radio. And by the late 90s, it was awful. It was, it was these really awful metal punk type bands like Korn and Limp Bizkit, and just all kinds of non-melodic music was taking over the airwaves. And it's like, no, I want to bring melodies back.
Yes, well,
Unfortunately,
absolutely.
it didn't quite happen the way we wanted, but we're still doing it. So
Well, but it's a massive thing, isn't it, to sort of think. So, how did you? I mean, how does this kind of happen? One has an idea, you sort of get excited one evening in this country. It might have been in a pub after a few drinks with some mates, and you go, "I know we're going to do this," and then you wake up the next day and think, "Oh my God, that was a disastrous idea," or "That will never happen." I hope no one remembers that conversation. But you obviously had the dream. Did you have a sort of some sort of moment, an epiphany, or
actually
some?
did. It was in a restaurant, a fast food restaurant called Carl's Jr. And I was sitting there with a music attorney friend of mine named Ben McLean, and there had been an existing festival in Los Angeles called Poptopia, and that kind of laid the ground for international pop overthrow. The biggest difference between the two was Poptopia was mostly Los Angeles bands. I
Yes.
wanted mine to be a worldwide scene. So I was speaking with Ben, and I said, you know what? I've seen what the organizer of Poptopia does. I think I can do it too, but I wanted to emphasize a worldwide pop scene. And he said, you should do it. And I never looked back from that moment.
Yes.
Yeah, I did have some trepidation over the next few months. I was thinking, because some people said if you bring bands from outside of LA, no one's going to come. And for a while I got a little frightened by that, but I was undaunted. I said, "We'll make it. We'll make it work." And yeah, we did. We really did.
And so,
And
how long did Poptopia sort of last, or is that still going?
it lasted. It went from 1996 through 2002, and there was a year where they didn't do it. So yeah,
Right.
we were both doing it for a few years, but they were in February and we were in July or August, so we were nowhere near them.
No.
That was always the goal. I never wanted to compete with them. I wanted us to coexist,
Yes. So
and
when
we
you
did. But they just lost. I think the organizers of that lost interest after a while, and maybe they had to go on to other things. But it was something I was born to do.
so it was 1997. The dream started for you.
98.
98. It was.
98, yeah.
And then and so when you put it together, did you look at it as the sort of the classic 3-day festival, sort of Friday through to Sunday that we have in this country, and did you sort of also what did you use just one venue for the first one, or did you have several?
Well, we actually did it for 10 days, August 21 through August 30th, and we used several venues. At that time, there were a lot of venues who were willing to have us, including some very famous ones like the Troubadour.
Right.
We did shows there for the first few years, and until it just until it became a little bit too expensive. They raised their rates and they priced us out of. But yeah, the Troubadour, the El Rey, that was another very and still is another very big venue. Um,
Yes.
and there were others around LA. Almost everybody was willing to do it because back then people went out. I mean, we had a young crowd. Mostly people in their 20s, maybe 30s, who like this kind of music. And back then there weren't a lot of options. I mean, DVDs hadn't even started to happen yet, and the internet was just in its infancy. So and if you want, so there weren't there people just were much more willing to go out then. Plus they were younger and had a lot more energy. Over
Yes.
the years, the the fan base of power pop has aged along with the bands who are doing it. So, because you don't have too many young bands doing that kind of music anymore. There are some, of course, but not a lot. So, over the years, the age group has grown. As the age group I should say, has increased and in age, yeah, and again, they don't quite have the energy they used to have, and there are so many more options to do things than
Well,
there were.
yes, there's a lot more things
So
to sort of be distracted by. But that was quite ambitious. Like 98, you book a load of festival venues, you put this festival on for 10 days and book 120 pop and rock acts from all over.
110, but
Pardon?
110, but
110, but that's still a lot. That's a
that
lot
is a
to.
lot. For a while, I didn't know what I was doing the first year. Again, Poptopia was the blueprint for us. So
Right.
I did a lot of what they did, and did some things differently, some things that they did that wasn't really my personality. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm shocked that we even got through it the first year, but it
Did
was a
you?
big success.
I mean, to sort of sign all those bands up for that festival, did you have to take a bit of a gamble that, we'll invest that, we'll book this, and now we're just going to have to wait for those ticket sales. Otherwise, we're going to have plan B, which we haven't got a plan B, but let's just, apart from crossing your fingers and praying. I mean,
Yeah,
did
yeah,
you?
we definitely took a gamble. And again, some people were saying, it's not going to work with all the out of town bands you're booking. But I never booked a band whose music I didn't hear. Over the past few years, at that time, I've been reviewing band CDs for those magazines that I mentioned. I knew a lot of bands. Plus, at that point, everybody, most people had email, so you could communicate with anyone around the world, and that was key.
Yes.
It kept expenses down. You didn't have to call people, and it made things much more manageable. So it wasn't hard for me to find bands. My first question was, will they come? But flight prices and hotel prices were a lot cheaper then.
Right. So
So
there you go. Yeah. I
bands from
mean,
all over the world came. I was really surprised, but most of them accepted my invitation.
so this lineup had people like Velvet Crush,
It
the
did.
drag star Barbie,
Oh,
Matt
you're looking at
Bruno.
the lineup from
I'm
'98.
looking at a vague lineup here. It was just incredibly impressive, actually. And did you? I mean, again, being an organizer is very different to being a punter. Did you emotionally have the ability to sort of deal with all the endless issues and tissues and tears and people's kind of demands and hiccups that can come at you
Yeah.
left, right, and centre? Did that all just kind of, was that something that you dealt with kind of quite smoothly?
No, the first year was definitely not smooth, but I dealt with it. I mean, I tried to book some bigger bands the first few years, but along with that did become, some ego demands, especially if I was dealing with the band's managers. Um, and it did put a lot of stress on me, and I just don't have the personality for it. I don't want. I try to make the festival as egalitarian as possible, but you couldn't do that with the bigger bands. They all demanded more, and most of the time I would acquiesce because obviously I wanted bigger crowds. Um, so over the years, I've invited fewer bigger bands and just concentrated on good ones.
Yes, well, absolutely. And did and
I always hated the question. I would mention, IPO is coming up, and people would say to me, "Well, what big names do you have?" And I hated that. So I would always say, "I don't care about big names. I care about good bands, and we have them."
yes,
So
so
the idea of this kind of festival is to come and discover new things. Some people got it and some didn't, but that became more and more of the goal as the years went on, because again, the bigger acts always came with they always came with demands that I just didn't want to deal with.
No, God, that's irritating. I mean, to be honest, it was a bit like my love of John Peel. I mean, you didn't know what he was going to play. It wasn't compiled by a committee, or it was compiled and set up by himself. He carefully curated it, and it was beautifully done. But you always sort of trusted his taste. So it could be indie pop, it could be thrash metal, it could be
Right.
reggae, African music, Bulgarian folk. But you just kind of thought that he'd put the work in and would have picked a good song out of this area and this area and just put it together in like a 2-hour show. So you knew that someone would go, but you just trusted. It was almost like, I know it's a bit of a dirty word, the brand. You'd go, well, I don't know what he's going to play tonight, and if he mentions them, I still will be none the wiser because they're all new bands. So I'm just going to have to put I'd never listened to him live. I'd always put my trusty TDK D90 cassette in and listen to it, because because it was all new music, you needed to listen to it a few times to pick parts of, just to sort of get a bit of an idea of what he'd played, and to sort of be able to properly kind of digest it, I suppose. And yes, just get a bit of a handle on it, because it was just all too tricky at times. And he liked to play tricky stuff as well. But sometimes, on the second or third play, you went, I really like that. I will now go and discover more about that band myself, or even invest in an album. So, which in those days, a bit like you were talking about the internet. I mean, probably when you started, it was dial-up, wasn't it? In those days, we didn't sort of just have Wi-Fi. We used to have to dial up with some
We
sort of.
didn't have Wi-Fi, but we did have something called DSL,
Oh right,
which,
okay. I just
which
remember we
was
got
the next
panicky
step.
when we used to dial up and think, God, our phone bill's going to be so
By the
expensive.
time by the time I started doing IPO, we had DSL, which was the next step up from dial-up. It was much
Right.
faster. Uh,
So then, as we navigated the millennium and the millennium bug and all that excitement, yes. Then when did you decide? Right, I'm going to expand my hobby interest empire from LA to New York. What was that like for you to sort of hit a different city?
well, here's what happened in 2001 at it was our fourth straight year of the Los Angeles Festival. We did a panel, and during the panel, one of the bands who had been flying in from the East Coast said, "David, I think it's time you bring this festival on the road. We we can't afford to keep flying out here. Bring it closer where we live, and that's more manageable." And I'd thought about doing it that way, but again, there were some trepidations. But later that evening at our show, uh, a man from one of the bands from New York that came out to LA said, "David, bring it to New York. I'll help you. Bless you. I'll help you. I'll get you venues. I'll get you bands. I know you know some now, but I'll find more for you. We can make this work." And that definitely eased my trepidation a bit. And so we went for it. Now, of course, that was 2001. So you may remember what happened on September 11th that year.
Yes.
Now, we had planned IPO for December. So all right, September 11th happens, and I don't contact any band. At that point, I have the festival booked. I don't contact any bands, so I wait for 2 weeks, and then I contact them and say, should we do this? And they all came back and said, absolutely, we need it now. We really need it. By December, it was Manhattan was still a bit of a mess, but you could the venues had reopened. You could get to them. Sometimes it was a little tricky because certain areas of lower Manhattan were still closed, so you had to navigate around. But we did it, and it was a huge success. And then the following year, I wanted to bring it to Chicago. Now that's where Material Issue is from.
Right.
So I thought Chicago will really take to this, and they did. They really felt like it was their own. And but then Liverpool was the really big one.
Yeah.
And what
So
happened?
Just
Go
before
ahead.
Liverpool. So what sort of, how many numbers were like, say, the first year tickets sold to, and the one in New York? How many were you kind of selling? I have no idea of the kind of the ticket sales.
Well, it varied depending on which bands were on the bill and which day of the week it was. But we had as many in both New York and Chicago the first year. We had as many as 300 people coming and as few as maybe 40, which is not bad. I'd like to have that now. But it was good, at that time it was definitely good enough. And
Yes.
so we kept, we kept being invited back. And both in New York and Chicago, we used multiple well, when I say multiple venues, I mean maybe a different one each day. I never used more than one at a time. I wanted to be at all our shows. I couldn't be in two places at once.
Right. Yes. The ultimate fanboy. Yes.
I was the ultimate fanboy. And then in early 2003, I get a phone call from a woman named Jean Catherall. She says, "Have you ever thought about doing the festival in Europe?" I said, "Well, no, not really. That seemed too daunting for me." But then she said, Would you like to do it at the Cavern Club?" And you could have knocked me over with a feather. I was in shock. I didn't think that would be. I didn't think that could possibly happen. I said, "Yeah, you bet I would." And she said, "Well, leave it with me. I know the people at the Cavern. I'll talk to them, and I'll be back with you in a couple of days." And sure enough, she called me in a couple of days and said they want to do it. I couldn't believe it.
No.
But at that point, I was a seasoned veteran, and I wasn't really worried about it. I knew enough bands from the UK at that point that I wouldn't have a problem. I knew I wouldn't have a problem booking it. It was a bit of a challenge, though. This was before MySpace or Facebook,
Right.
but we did it, and we did it in October in our first 2 years, 2003 and 2004, and then we were able to move it to the bank holiday area in May, which helped us quite a bit.
God,
Uh,
that's
and by
amazing.
that time, MySpace was flourishing, and they had a really good search engine. So we could find bands from all over the world who did the kind of music we wanted and invite them that way. And so the festival kept growing. And for a while we were actually using several venues at a time. The way not just the Cavern, but a few others on Matthew Street. And, but we always made sure that, and each band got to play twice. But we
Right.
made sure that one of the shows was in the Cavern, so I could see every band.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and
So,
yeah, at one time we had as many as 180 bands playing. We're down to 110 now because things have changed. We now only use the Cavern Club and the Cavern Pub, but
yes.
it's still great. And of course, search engines, so many new ones have come up. Besides, you don't have MySpace anymore, but you have Facebook, you have Bandcamp, you have Spotify. You have all kinds of different options to find bands.
Yes.
So it's made things easier. We really don't. You have to do a lot of work, but you really don't have a problem finding them. The question
Yeah.
is, will they play? And
Right.
we still have a good amount of bands from outside of the UK coming.
So do you
Almost
spend
half, almost half of our bands are from outside the UK.
for the Liverpool one? I
The Liverpool
suppose
one, yeah.
do most of them come from Europe then? Are they sort of from
Oh
the
yeah.
they're all from there, which is
No, I
incredible.
mean, the bulk of our bands come from different areas of the UK. And
Yes.
but
But
then
how
we
do
have
you
some from other countries and the US, by the way.
I would, yes. Well, that way round. I think British bands trying to play in America have such a lot of it's expensive and tricky. A lot of admin, isn't there? A lot
Well,
of
it's
admin.
expensive for the US bands to come to the UK as well, but the difference is it's the Cavern Club. You
Right.
know, with their Beatles connection and just their they're billing as the most famous club in the world, which it really is. People want to play. They want to say, I played on in the same place that the Beatles played. And it's not the same building, as you know, probably.
Yes.
It was torn down in the early 80s and then rebuilt later in the decade. But it's close enough. It's still Matthew Street. They have two stages now, and the front stage looks just like the stage the Beatles played on.
Right. God,
Um,
that's amazing. But I just, like with Michael Evers and Glastonbury, which is still an amazing festival.
oh
I mean,
yeah,
that's for the, I mean, it's more than the weekend, isn't it, really? But I mean, that's kind of one event. But you're going, I mean, from last year, you had from April, June, right through to November. And there was there about 9 different events. And this year
nine
you've,
different cities. Well, that's low for us. We've been before COVID, we were in as many as 16 cities in a year.
so how did you manage? I mean, how do you manage to keep it together? Not only having to listen to all this music and thinking, right, I'm going to book this. The band has to have that sound that you like, so that has to pass that sort of test, and then you have to sort of try and locate them and line them up to come and play for you. I mean, there's and then over 100 bands at these weekends. How do you manage to do that? I mean, I just think that is
Well,
boggling.
first of all, I don't look at it as having to listen to them. I
No,
look at it as
this
wanting
is
to.
wanting
Um,
to.
I only book bands I like, so so that makes it a pleasure. But yeah, you're right. When you do the searches, sometimes you have to listen to bands that aren't to your liking or aren't right for the festival. Fortunately, I have a wife, my wife Rena Bardfield. She she's an amazing person. She's an aerospace engineer by day,
Right.
which is a very intense job. But when she's not working, sometimes she's able to. And she has way more patience than I do. She'll do the searches. She knows my taste 100%. So she'll do the searches, and then she'll play the bands for me, and then I choose which ones I want. Um,
Right.
it's so she's been very helpful in that respect. And as you know, some of the cities it is just a weekend, but Liverpool is 8 days, 8 days a week. Of course, is perfect. Um, and Chicago and LA are 9 or 10 days.
Yes. I just,
The other ones are anywhere between 2 and 4 days.
I just,
Um, but yeah, I mean, because of the search engines, when you can narrow down the style of music that you're looking for and the cities in which you're looking for it, it makes things a lot easier. I don't think we could have done that. Uh, let's say 20, back in the late '90s. I don't think I could have done as many cities. I mean, well, I know I
mm.
have.
Well,
There weren't enough ways to find the bands, but now you can, and we have to do a lot of research because bands, if they, so, I do get bands contacting me cold asking if they can play. Um, but for the most part, these days, bands don't really work it as much as they used to. Before, before bands had websites where you could hear their music, they had
mm.
to be very proactive. Now, of course, their music's on the internet everywhere, and they've gotten a little bit they've gotten lax, for lack of a better word, and they don't work as hard as they used to. They figure, well, people will find us. Not necessarily. If you've been written about, people will find you. If you haven't, then they won't. And you have to be active. But we're one of the few festivals who are willing to do the work to find the bands out there that would be right for what we're doing.
Yeah, and I guess you get to hear it, and you have to sort of listen and sort of see it sort of passes the taste test. But then you have obviously haven't seen that band live. So when you go to your weekends, is it quite exciting to think, oh, that's what they look like? And I mean, is that quite Do you quite enjoy that part of it? Because
Very
obviously,
much. And yeah, you're right. I haven't seen them live. It would be nice if it could be like the '60s, where bands would actually come into a venue and the owner would be there and they would play for the owner. And from that live performance, the owner would then decide whether or not they wanted to book them.
yes,
It's obviously not that way anymore. But and so because of that, some bands live don't measure up to their recorded music, and some live, absolutely exceed their recorded music. And it's always a pleasure when we find a band um, that exceeds it. And there are several at every festival that's like, wow, they're even better live than their records.
yes,
And
absolutely.
then there's some like, live, they're just kind of they really needed the studio to get their sound.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, you see both, but yeah, it's
So
very, very exciting to see the show. That's why I always go.
absolutely. So last year you had sort of nine, and you finished with November, where you have three in November, which is quite extraordinary. You must have been shattered after that experience.
Yeah, I'm shattered after just about all of them because the adrenaline, you go from having a huge adrenaline rush to suddenly be depleted, and so that shatters you just on its own. But yeah, November is a busy month. We're in New York, Boston, and Toronto,
Well, yes. So when do
and
you then start? Do you obviously have to start scheduling the ones for this year? And you've got five starting in April in Chicago. So did you book those way in advance the year before to say, look,
no, you don't really have to go that. You don't have to go the year before. Well, all right, Chicago. I started contacting bands in December, and this weekend I'm going to put together the lineups for that. Um, we have Milwaukee right after Chicago, and I'm still booking that one.
yes.
Liverpool is completely booked.
Oh,
Uh,
how exciting.
but it's going to be a little while before we can put those lineups together because we're talking about 110 bands from all around the world who played twice. So that's a tough one. Thankfully, my wife helps me a lot with that. And this year we're going to be in Glasgow. We haven't put that one up yet on the website, but June 11th through 13th, we're in Glasgow for the first time ever. So
Right.
I just set that one up. Actually earlier this week, and I've started to invite bands to that one. So that we always love to be able to go to new places. As you know, by looking at our schedule, we've been in Copenhagen, we've been in Stockholm. We 10 years ago, well, a little from 2010 to 2014, we were in London, and we may go back there at some point. But yeah, new places are always very exciting.
My God, you've got such a spirit of adventure with all this. It's sort of to keep it going is just an amazing work of art. Have you managed to document it all? Your incredible kind of legacy and work that you've done. Have you, is there some sort of nice record that we're gonna? I know you've got your website, but it doesn't go back to your very early events, do you?
No, but here's one way that we've documented it. I'll pull this one out.
Oh, nice.
Hold on, I don't want to make a mess here. Um, every year we do a compilation.
Oh,
And,
yes.
this is the latest one, International Pop Overthrow Volume 26. And this is a 3-disc compilation with how many tracks did we have on here? I think 66 on this one by bands from all over the world, most of whom play IPO. Some don't because geographically it doesn't work out. But if I like their music, I'll contact them and say, how would you like to have a track on here? Um,
Yes.
we've done this since year one. Well, in 1998, it was only 1 disc. Then the next 3 years, it was 2 discs, and starting with Volume 5, it went to 3, and it's been 3 discs every year.
Blimey, that's really
So
amazing.
that's one documentation. I wish we had done a little bit more filming of shows. What I do now is I take a video of each band, one song, and I put that up on Facebook as soon as I've recorded it.
Yes.
So, that's another documentation. But yeah, I wish I could afford a film crew that could, film the whole of the events. But we're not there. I don't know if we ever will be. But the most important thing is that the bands are playing and they're having a really good time, and
Yes, absolutely.
they really get something out of this.
And when do tickets go on sale for your for the first one? Are they already on sale? And do you go through the website? Your sort of
I'm trying to remember. In Chicago, I don't know that we do advance tickets. I think it's all at the door.
right,
Um, but in some of the other cities, we'll do advance tickets, like New York, Toronto. We definitely do advance there.
right.
Uh,
So it's just literally, God, you are so relaxed, aren't you? Not even doing pre-ticket sales.
no, I mean I know that we'll have good attendance at the door. I'm not worried about that. No, we don't use, the Cavern right now is the biggest venue we use. Most of the venues we use hold, maybe 100 people. Um,
Right.
so we're not really concerned about having a good crowd in those small venues. Uh,
Yes.
things have changed. You can't book the big venues like we could when we started IPO. They're too expensive now.
Yes. Amazing. And do you have a very committed fan base? Do you have people who are there every year, or you go, oh yes, they've been here with me a few years here.
Sure,
Have they
there's
grown? Have they
always some.
grown with you?
Yeah, I mean, there are always some that come to each festival. We have, our regulars, probably the most in Liverpool. I mean, we definitely have the most people coming back to that one year after year. And again, you can't blame them. The bands are too good. But yeah, and I always look forward to seeing the regulars and meeting new people as well.
Well,
Every year
quite.
we get new people.
So with Liverpool, have you got any names that you can tell me that you've got?
I want to keep that a secret for now.
Yes. Well, I
But
was just
when the schedule goes up, you'll see. And again, I actually don't think we have any big name acts, but again, it doesn't. To me, that doesn't matter.
no, it doesn't. But I just wondered if it was anybody. Like I said, I was doing an interview the
I'll
other
tell you
night.
this much: if you look at last year's lineups and you've heard of them, then you'll definitely have heard of some of them this year too.
Right.
A lot of them are repeat, and even the new ones are at the same level. So, and you mentioned the Woodbees. Obviously, you know them. So, uh, we were so happy. I was so happy when they accepted my invitation to play. I wasn't sure they would, but yeah, they're great.
Well, I was doing an interview with the two of the members, and they were having a bit of a within the interview they were having a bit of a chat about things that were coming up and potential shows, if you know what I mean. And she
Yes.
went, "Oh, yes, well, yes, definitely." So it was very exciting. I think that will be amazing. I think they go back with John Peel to 1989 with I'm Hardly Ever Wrong, which was their single,
Yeah,
and their new album, which came out last year, is just amazing. So
it really is. And yeah, I'm hardly ever wrong. I didn't realize it, but I knew that song at the time. That was a song that one of the college radio stations played, and I'd heard it then and really liked it. But I guess I forgot about it. Even when they sprang up in our searches this year, I didn't connect to that older single. But when I found that out, I was like, really? It's the same band? Wow. Because they seem younger than they could be to do a song in '89, but I guess they're not.
yes, and do you? I mean, you must have an amazing. I mean, for the contribution you've made to music and art, it's been incredible. So you must have made a lot of friends and given a lot of people so much happiness with what you've done. To give people a platform to play, I think is just amazing. And I think, I've often wondered about why the 80s seemed to be a very good time for sort of indie pop. And I think we had the John Peel Show, Janice Long, Kid Jensen. We had the three music papers, which had huge circulation. And then every city and town would have an alternative indie night somewhere, mostly on a
Yeah,
Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday when it was not going to be particularly booked for the Friday and Saturday nights. And,
sure.
you could almost guarantee 100 to 200 indie kids would turn up to see three bands. And
Oh
I
yeah, at
just,
that time, sure. I'm sure
and
you
it
could.
and it was just really good to those scenes created this really amazing holistic, I say holistic, but it helped feed itself, didn't it? The world
Yes.
of music. It gave bands the chance to think, well, we've gone from sort of rehearsing to now we can get a single on the John Peel Show, a session, and now we've got a transit van and we can have 6 nights and travel around the country and have our wild adventures. I think it's just so good. And I think playing live gives the bands a little bit of a feedback, a bit like the Beatles did in Hamburg or, David Bowie did during the 60s playing live. You sort of develop your craft, don't you, and find out what works and what doesn't. But playing live does help, doesn't it, a
Playing
lot?
live helps a lot. The bands who are the best live are generally the ones who play the most.
Yes.
Because you learn what to do and what not to do, and also you get more confident, and then on stage you can be more demonstrative, and that's kind of what you want to see when you see a band live. If they're just standing there playing their instruments, I mean, that's all well and good if the songs are good, but you get a value added when they get more demonstrative. The lead singer emotes a lot more, and maybe the bands jump up and down, or just do stuff on stage. It and the more you play, the more confident you are in being able to do that and pull it off.
Yes.
So yeah, it's all when a band plays live, the more they generally are better. But
Yeah, because with your, just look at your Liverpool one last year, you've got an amazing amount of bands and nights at the Cavern. I mean, it's a very tight schedule. Everyone plays for 45 minutes. Does that
30
mean you've
minutes
got
actually.
two? Is it? Do you have
They play
two
30
stages?
minutes. The 15 minutes in between are to get off the stage and the new one get on the stage.
Right. So do you have an engineer at the club that will do all the bits and pieces for you?
Yes, I mean, fortunately, the Cavern has some great engineers that we've worked with now for many years, and even when they get new ones in, they end up being really good. They're trained well. The
Yes.
Cavern has great engineers, and when the bands are done, they go right up to the stage and they help them get off, and they help set up the new one. Um, we have a back line of guitar amps, bass amp, and drums that every band uses. And some of them don't really, they haven't used that gear before, so they need some help
Yeah.
adjusting the levels. So the sound engineer does that as well. No, we're in order to keep that kind of schedule running smoothly, you really need to have an engineer that goes up on stage and is active. And the Cavern has that. I mean, they've absolutely perfected that art. Other places, other venues we use, some yes, some no. You don't know who you're going to be dealing with until you do it. Um,
Mm.
but for the most part, things go well. I mean, I don't book a venue unless I've heard good things about it
Yeah.
from bands I know who've played there.
And because you've got an amazing schedule starting from 12 p.m. to 12 a.m., I guess.
On the
That's the way
weekends, yes.
at the weekends with this half an hour, so it's 45 minutes from one to another. I mean, that's a hell of a tight schedule. Do you find yourself, do many bands occasionally drop out and you think, okay, we're going to have to fill somebody in at the
Oh
last minute?
yeah. That does happen a lot because you've got, as I said, you've got bands traveling in at the Cavern. It doesn't happen. In the other cities, it's mostly local acts. At the Cavern, this year we have 14 acts from Liverpool. Everybody else is from outside of Liverpool.
Right.
So yeah, invariably you're going to have bands have to drop out at the last minute. But the good thing is, well, we generally don't try to find a new act if that happens. We'll take an existing act, especially one who's traveled a long way to get there, and we'll say, "You want another show?" They always say yes,
Yes. Well,
even
absolutely.
if it's at the last minute. Like we just had it's like 1 o'clock. We just had a slot open up at 1:30. Do you want it? And they'll always say yes.
Yes. Well, absolutely. And do you have the same contract for every band? Do you say this is the deal and that's it, or do you have to negotiate everything with each of these bands?
Well, if you've ever seen the movie Jersey Boys about the Four Seasons,
Yes.
um, Bob Gaudio says to Frankie Valli, the lead singer, I think you should go solo, and I want to manage you and produce you. And he says, and Valli agrees. And Bob Gaudio says, well, I'll have the contract. I'll get you the contract tomorrow. And Valli just puts out his hand, and Gaudio does too, and they shake hands. And Valli says, I don't need a contract. This is a New Jersey contract.
Right.
That's my contract with bands. And because and I can reveal this. This makes everything even more amazing. But because of my own expenses and just having to make enough money to ensure that we do the festival each year, none of
Yes.
the acts are paid. And most of them don't ask for money because they know that that's how festivals generally work. Some can pay, some can't. And anyone who asks for money up front, I'll explain to them. I'll say, unfortunately, we don't have it in the budget. This is why. I'll say, but you won't regret it if you come, which is true. They never do. They're always happy they did it. And yes, some bands will say, okay, I see where you're coming from. We'll come without pay, uh, without travel or accommodations paid for. And others will say, no, we have to get paid. So, the ones who say they'll do it, they come. The ones who don't, don't. Um,
And I
but
guess at the same time, they try and sell their CDs and merchandise.
yes, we definitely have merchandise tables everywhere we do the festival, I'm always on when I introduce a band. I introduce every band from the stage. When I introduce a band, if they have merch, I always mention it.
Right.
Because I want them to, I want them to make some money back. And we've had bands, and not just at the Cavern, but elsewhere, sell out their entire stock that they brought with them.
Fantastic.
If they're really good and people like them, then yeah, that can happen.
Fantastic. So with the Liverpool one, I keep going on about that, but just as an
It's
example.
May 24th through 31.
So do people buy a ticket for one day, or do you sort of buy a ticket for the whole event and just go?
I tried to set up a whole event thing with the Cavern, but they weren't into it. So you just come and buy it on the door.
Right. So how much was the ticket for each day then?
Well, the Cavern Pub is free, and this is all set up by the Cavern, not me.
Right.
But the Cavern Pub across the street from the Cavern Club is free, and the Cavern Club shows are anywhere from, I don't know, I think it's £2 or £3 to £7, depending upon the day.
For a ticket for a ticket to go in.
That's for a ticket to go in, yeah.
Wow.
And then they can stay the whole day if they want.
So for sort of £2 to £7, you can get to see about 12 bands. Right.
Sometimes more than 12.
Well, absolutely.
We've had people stay from moment one to the end.
Oh, right. So you really, for a small amount of money, you're going to see a lot of music, aren't you?
Absolutely.
God, that's quite amazing. That's such a good vibe thing. And there you go.
That's what it's all about. That's why bands keep coming back year after year, no matter what city we do it in. because the vibe is very, very good.
Yes, and your audience must be, in this day and age, relieved that there's something that they don't have to get into debt for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I mean, in most cities, well, in U.S. cities, we usually keep it at either $10 or $15, which is not a lot. You're right. I mean, so no, they are happy about that.
Well, very happy. Well, that's just amazing. I'm processing that as we talk because I had no idea it was such a kind of love fest, really, of indie
It
pop.
really is. I mean, I can't think of anything else I'd want to do, and I always thank the bands for creating this kind of music that makes me happy.
Well, you must be on cloud nine at the end of these events. Yes,
I mean, yeah, usually at the end of every evening, I sometimes find it hard to fall asleep because, again, the adrenaline. Until the adrenaline leaves me, I'm still, even if I'm tired, I'm still awake, just
yes.
thinking about what happened that night.
Well, I'm sure it's just an amazing event. I mean, wow, that's just brilliant. Well, well, I'm looking forward to seeing your lineup. What I'll do, I'll put a link in the note below, notes in the chat, with your website, and hopefully people will be able to sort of locate it easily and visit whatever city there is that is
You're in
nearby.
London.
Pardon?
You're based in London.
No, I'm based in Norwich, which is kind of on the east coast, so in that direction. But you said you got Glasgow. What month is Glasgow?
It's June 11th through 13th, so
Right.
it's two weekends after Liverpool ends. And I'm trying to set up another city in between the Liverpool and Glasgow, but um, I'm still working on Stockholm, maybe Copenhagen. We'll see. But if it doesn't happen, then my wife and I will go vacation someplace in between, and it'll be fine. But yeah,
And what did you say her day job was?
aerospace engineer.
Right, an aerospace.
She builds satellites that you see on the ones that hover over the earth and
Yes.
help us communicate, or you see them on the space stations, for example. That's
Right.
that's what she does. She's a genius.
Yes. A fondness of indie pop in her veins.
Yeah, she sure does.
Well, it probably keeps her sane when she's dealing with that world as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
it helps, doesn't it? Well, look, thank you ever so much. I'll keep in touch. I'll send you a link as well for your history, for your archives, and you can
Please
always
do,
use it.
David. Please do, and thank you so much for having me. It was
Yes, well, it's
I
been a
enjoyed it.
pleasure. Amazing. Well, boggling. Okay, look, have a lovely day, and
You
I'll rock
too.
on. Take
Well, I
care.
guess it's night for you, but yeah,
It is night,
have a
yes.
lovely night.
You
Thank you
too.
again for having me.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye bye.
And that was me in conversation with David Bash talking about the International Pop Overthrow event that's been going for decades and also what they've got planned for 2026. This has been the C86 show. David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Have a great week. Stay safe.